Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we're going to speak to Adams van Zyl, aka Conscious Caracal from AfriForum, because we need to understand. We don't like NGOs generally, especially the foreign funded ones, but the local ones are pretty great and we think AfriForum is worth supporting as well. So Adams, hello, welcome to the show.
Goeiemiddag, Roman, or actually goeiemorgen, I think, is when this will be released.
Indeed, indeed. So really my first question for AfriForum is, how much money does George Soros give you a year?
Well, that's the thing, is I think what AfriForum proves specifically is that there's no benefit, long-term benefit, on getting all your funds from one central point. And the thing why that's important, and I think that's the lesson that AfriForum can teach a lot of people, is that when your funding comes from 310,000 members, you don't have the whims of one billionaire that can decide tomorrow you support this, tomorrow you support this. It's a lot more comfortable for my moral compass to be able to work for an organization where I know I'm not going to be getting a message tomorrow or a memo tomorrow that the big boss just told us we need to go this way rather than this way. And I think that's the big lesson that can be learned. And unfortunately, some people don't see it. They still think you need big money from one central oligarchy of funders to really be able to make a difference. And we completely shatter that idea.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you're funded by George Soros.
I didn't hear a number.
No, well, if the question is how many rands are we receiving, then that's a big fat zero from those individuals or any big funders.
AfriForum is deeply patriotic, right? I mean, you guys say South Africa's your land. You don't really have an affinity to European destinations such as Amsterdam or Netherlands. Well, talk a little bit about that.
Well, maybe a bit of the longer answer to give you a clearer picture would be if you took AfriForum's headquarters and all our capital and all our structures and all our branches, and you just planted us in Europe or in America, the entire organization would cease to exist. The AfriForum's entire model is built on functioning in Southern Africa and building and working on solutions for Southern Africa and the future of this corner of Africa. Judging whether an organization is a net benefit to your country or to your region, or whether they are just an extractive force or are serving other interests outside of your country. I think that rule of thumb would necessarily be, is their model predicated on a future, building a future here, or is their model completely, completely reliant on interests outside of South Africa? So I think if you apply that rule of thumb, then I think you'll have a very clear idea of what organizations are empowering South Africans, for example, and which ones are disempowering them. Many of them, like, for example, gun-free South Africa, trying to make South Africans completely vulnerable and just victims of the chaos around them rather than being able to defend themselves and their communities.
So I think that's actually a very good point. The more universal the NGO's goals, the less likely it is that it's good for that particular place, right? So Gun-Free SA, you can put Gun-Free SA anywhere in the world and they would still be an organization, right? The world,
yeah, and you can imagine them being there. You can imagine a gun-free organization like that in India or in the USA or in the UK. But you can't imagine a scenario where AfriForum is planted in any of those countries. It's like AfriForum is a type of plant that only grows in a certain types of soil, and that soil is the red soil of Southern Africa.
But what is AfriForum's view on, maybe not building up a political, right-wing populist movement of sorts by any means, but what is AfriForum's view on sort of patriotism?
The simple answer would be AfriForum's big mission is to break that cycle of state dependence, or even a dependence on outside forces keeping your community alive or prosperous. You need to be able to be self-sufficient. You need to be able to secure your community and make sure that it can survive without massive funding from the outside, like we see with many countries that are completely not just addicted, but locked into a aid vicious cycle from abroad, where if that aid were to dry up, that country would be in a very difficult position. So in microcosm, AfriForum's future view is to make as many communities as possible and to empower and inspire as many communities as possible to become self-reliant. That's self-dun, or in Zulu it would be zenzele, to not be dependent on the state or on foreign aid, to be able to stand on your 2 feet. And that makes you a lot more resilient, and you make your community sovereign. I think before we can even start talking about it, the sovereignty of the country, you need to start asking, is your community sovereign? Is your community able to determine its destiny, or is it just reliant on everything from the outside? Security, food, electricity, water. Is everything that it needs to flourish and survive, is everything that it needs for that, is it coming from the outside? Does it depend on some superstructure for it, or can it actually take those types of services into its own hands? That's the question that needs to be asked, and AfriForum wants to make sure that as many communities as possible can answer the question in a way that is, yes, we can handle many of these or all of these, or we are working on managing as many of these life source resources as possible. When it comes to thinking about problems, I think it's very important to first make sure that you are getting the basics right in microcosm before you start applying these principles nationally, or I don't even want to talk about internationally. I don't think you should be aiming to achieve anything internationally in that regard. You should be looking at, is your community state proof, is the terminology. I think the simplest way of putting it.
I'd like to get your opinion on this. So Ramon and I intercepted a message by a very senior ANC individual, which is basically a message that they gave inside of the ANC, and they were basically discussing certain forms of politics in the country. The whole point of the message was that the media in South Africa is deeply captured and owned by one or two families in the country. I think I don't need to say who they are. I think you can guess yourselves. And their idea was that basically, no matter what they did in the country, the media always took a deeply negative view to them, even when the policies that they adopted were deeply nationalistic and deeply for the benefit of the majority of people. Do you think that there might be anything in that? Is there a concerted effort by the mainstream media in South Africa to water AfriForum's message down and almost dilute it to the point where it's lost in the narrative?
I think it is a concern that you could possibly have, but it's not really an excuse. When in the times that we're living in, I mean, your channel is an example of why this is not an excuse, and I think you can see where I'm going. It's the media is the traditional legacy media no longer have a monopoly chokehold on what gets out there and what does not. If you really wanted to get a message out there to your supporters, do a YouTube live stream, do a Facebook live stream. Even you can use you don't even have to go to alternative social media networks. If you're the ANC, just do a Twitter space, do a massive live stream on YouTube. You can get your message and any message you want out there without any filters. Yes, there has been many cases of the media dishonestly reporting on things happening in South Africa and on organizations like AfriForum. I don't think that's an excuse. I think in the time of the internet, you have a direct line to your supporters, a direct line to the public, and you just need to use the tools at your disposal. That's what AfriForum does. We don't rely on the media to get our message out there. They do report on what we're doing, and it does help signal boost what you're doing. But if you want to talk to your supporters directly, you have all the tools at your disposal to talk to your supporters directly. I don't think it's an excuse that, we really want to get the truth out there, but all the channels are just blocked and we can't really speak our minds in public. No, you can. You just either don't know that you have those tools at your disposal, or you're making excuses.
So, Adam's last sort of question from me. What is AfriForum's relationship with communities that aren't Afrikaans? You're a civil rights organization, ostensibly for Afrikaner rights in South Africa, which we agree with completely. You should be allowed to exist and expand and do whatever the hell you want. A lot of people outside, may not be the truth, but maybe it's a perception. A lot of people who are not Afrikaans might think that you are perhaps don't speak for them, or you don't do work on the behalf of anyone that is not Afrikaans, generally speaking. So what is AfriForum's role in ensuring that, especially conservative South Africans, patriotic South Africans, nationalist South Africans, don't have a role in AfriForum, but that AfriForum has a role to play in their lives as well?
I think the best example would be the example of a pothole. So when we fill a pothole in a busy street in a town or in a suburb or in a part of a city, that pothole doesn't discriminate. All the 95% of the cars that are going to drive over that filled pothole are not going to be AfriForum members. Many of the people that drive over the pothole might not even know that AfriForum filled it. But that's the thing about creating order, creating solutions, is that it's creating a little circle and then starting to expand that circle of order, and everyone within that radius benefits. Another great example would be neighborhood watches. All the communities where AfriForum have neighborhood watches, we have over 160 at this point already. In those 160 communities, the vast majority of people that live in those communities are not AfriForum members. So the vast majority of people that benefit from AfriForum neighborhood watches are not even AfriForum members. That's the way it works when you start creating centers of order. People start benefiting within a radius that you create. It's not a subscription service or like a private security service where you pay and the private security will only come help if you are a paying member or have a contract with them. It's rather creating centers of order that are expanding. So my colleague, for example, Barent Ace, who does intercultural cooperation or is in charge of intercultural cooperation at AfriForum, they are doing amazing work with, for example, organizations like SAI to create agricultural projects, joint agricultural projects, joint cultural recognition projects and development projects. There's a lot going on there. I wish he was less busy, because then you could actually easily get him interviewed maybe in the future. But he's doing amazing work, doing what his ancestors did and our ancestors did, and that is forging relationships between different communities. The other thing is that side of history is never taught. That side of history, Barent Ace knows very well. That's why he does the job that he does. But unfortunately, that history is not known. But he is still doing what his ancestors did, and that is forging relationships between communities. I mean, he just recently wrote a fantastic piece for Politics Web called The Battle of Ghost Mountain, the time the Afrikaners fought for the Zulus. I know what Bart and his work for AfriForum. Go read that piece and go watch some of the videos on YouTube of AfriForum's joint agricultural projects and initiatives. You might be seeing an organization that you didn't even know existed.
All very interesting stuff. So what would be your comment to any Black South African that's looking into AfriForum?
My final comment would actually be to anyone that sees their future in Southern Africa. And that comment would be, or that advice would be, if you want to build a future in Southern Africa, the future of Southern Africa belongs to people or groups and organizations or people that are doing two things: the people that are organizing and getting organized, and the people building alliances. The people that are doing those two things, the future belongs to them. That's why those people are maligned and attacked, and propaganda is spread about them, and why suspicion is sown all across the country about those groups or those organizations, because they are actually the ones who the future belongs to, the people that are able to do the dirty work, to get people together, to organize, to build, but also the people that are willing and able to forge powerful alliances with other groups and with other organizations in going into the future. Those people, future belongs to them.